Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of The Path Less Chosen, the podcast showing you the careers they don't teach you about at school. My name's Sol.
I'm Jamie.
Okay, so this week on the podcast, we have Dr. Amber Carter on, who is an ocean and human scientist. Amber, you can tell from her Instagram, she's doing loads of cool stuff. She's lived in ridiculous countries, Indonesia, Madagascar, and she's currently spending time in Costa Rica. So she's lived all around the world, but is clearly doing some really cool stuff and has worked with some unreal communities that I'm sure we'll get into more in the podcast. Jamie, what are you looking forward to take away from this?
Yeah, definitely. I think you summed it up nicely. I think what she's doing is traveling the world, doing really important work in like ecosystems, and it's something that's spoken a lot about in the news. But she's someone who's traveling the world, living that real life experience and doing the studies on it, and gets to live a pretty cool lifestyle as a result. So definitely keen to hear about the path that actually led her to doing what she's doing, because I know it's a quite unique one. And then also about the actual work itself, because I think it's going to be amazing.
Okay, sounds good. Let's get her on. Hey, Amber, so it's great to have you on. So if you could just give us a little bit of detail about what you're up to right now.
So I'm a social ecological marine scientist, which means I work with social data, ecological data, climate data, bring it all together to think about how we can support marine conservation, not only for the benefit of biodiversity, but for the benefit of the people who rely on the ocean the most for their livelihoods and their food security. So I've just finished my PhD at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm currently still working a little bit for the University of Edinburgh, but I'm also consulting for different marine conservation organisations on different projects.
I think there's a lot to get into on what you're actually doing now, but I think probably for the purpose of the podcast, and we always like to get into how people actually ended up down the path less chosen they're now on. I think it's really interesting that you're currently joining us on a podcast as a scientist doing cool things like that from Costa Rica, wherein you actually started out studying fashion management, I believe. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what happened there and how you've ended up where you are now?
Yeah, so I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was at school. I was always really into the arts. I did drama. I went all the way up to grade 8, classical singing. I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be all those things. Then it came to, I did like quite sciencey early levels. I did biology, chemistry, and geography. But when it came to it, I couldn't picture myself in any of those sorts of careers. And both my older sisters had studied fashion, different types of fashion at university. And so I just thought like it was meant to be. So I applied to London College of Fashion, got into this course called International Fashion Management. It was a new course, it was a master's. It all seemed quite exciting and, fancy. So I ended up going and studying international fashion management for a year in London. To be honest, kind of knew from the beginning that it wasn't for me. Like there's a part of me which loves that side of things, but it wasn't like in my soul. I knew it wasn't for me, but really, being someone that hates giving up on things, I did it for the whole year. That summer went to meet some friends who'd spent the year traveling, and I went and joined them in the summer in Indonesia. Learned to dive, the kind of maybe a cliche, learned to dive, and just still at that stage didn't see myself as like a marine scientist, but just knew that I didn't want to do fashion anymore. I wanted to do something more with the environment. So came back from traveling, got in through clearing to a university in London, Queen Mary University, to environmental science. I was in London at the time, and I made some friends and I wanted to stay there. But one of the main reasons I wanted to go to Queen Mary is because they had this study abroad program. So I applied to the study abroad program, ended up going to Miami. And in Miami, University of Miami, they have just this incredible marine science school. It's on this key, so it's on an island off the mainland. And I just took as many marine science classes as possible. And it was really during that year that I kind of realized being a marine scientist was an actual job that people had. And it almost seemed like a dream job, and it seemed like a really achievable dream and something really tangible and something I could see a path like to how I could get there. So I ended up.
When you were doing the classes,
did
you find that the classes were geared towards being a marine biologist, or were the classes geared towards just people who were genuinely interested in the subject but weren't really sure where to take the classes next?
Yeah, so they were like they were like the kind of undergraduate first year, second year level classes. So there was a whole range of people in there. I think a majority of people that took those classes wouldn't have become a marine scientist. Because it was those kind of, general, when you go to university, you do those kind of general first year, second year classes. I think, it just captures the imagination of certain people. And I was one of them. Yeah, and for kind of what I do now is so different to what I learned then as well. That is really like, we did things like dolphin behaviour. And we, one class, we went to the beach and we used coconuts, and we were measuring like the direction and the speed of travel in these coconuts in the water to study like how currents work. So it was really like, but that's why I loved it. It was such practical, hands-on stuff. And that's really a benefit of studying something like marine science in a place next to the ocean. You can go and do that. I don't know if either of you dive, like when you're first learning, I didn't take in what was around me at all. You're just like focused on like staying alive under the water and kind of, getting the synapses in your brain to form like, I can breathe underwater. But it was really something that really made me change into environmental science from that experience. And something that I spoke about while I was doing fashion was something I struggled with. It was fashion business. So, business is a human construct, and fashion is a human construct. And I was studying this thing, and I felt like it was never grounded in anything. It was maybe coming from a background of like sciences and geography, which are kind of like grounded in maths and rules. Okay, a business is, but this whole idea of fashion business, it was too constructed for me. I wanted something, I don't know, I was drawn to something more natural, if that's the right word for it.
Did you have that fear while you were traveling that the fashion industry was not for you, or was it really the being in the environment in Indonesia and Bali that sparked that like realization in you?
I think I had that fear for the whole year when I was doing when I was at university. Yeah, definitely a lesson to kind of follow your gut instinct. I mean, absolutely no regrets, but I knew at Christmas that after the first semester that it wasn't something that I wanted to do, but I carried on. I don't think it was any pressure from my family. I always remember this one comment that my nan made, like, your granddad would be so upset if he knew you gave up on your degree. Look at me now. But I think it was something that I was just aware of the whole time.
I think that's really interesting, because we have quite a few guests that have some kind of eureka moment, or they do something like that traveling to Indonesia, where it's a little trigger for them that, actually what I'm doing back in England or wherever they might be is eventually make them feel like fulfilled and give them a career that you can really enjoy. But then the actual decision to drop out of something like that, especially when you've got the family pressure like you've mentioned, is a big thing. So I'd be interested just to hear, and hopefully people listening would too, like what is your advice to someone that maybe is in that position thinking, I'm studying something I don't enjoy, I know I'm learning help. How do I keep my family happy and make that decision for myself to go and do what I want to do, really?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think following your gut. I guess I'm very lucky that maybe I had that eureka moment really early on. But just in your gut, if it feels not right, then kind of think about if it's something that you really want to do. Like, I have lots of people that I've met and in my life that either dropped out a degree that they didn't like and completely started again, dropped out, went and did something else for a while and completely started again, or did their degree but at the same time as doing their degree were chefing in restaurants, and now own a restaurant in London, kind of thing. Like, just knowing, well, first of all, I guess knowing that the degree isn't your end all and be all, definitely not, but also if your gut is really telling you that that's not what you want to do. Yeah. And in terms of family pressure, I guess I was lucky that my family pressure was quite small. But I think hopefully maybe if you've thought about another direction. You know, when I dropped out, I had already got a place in another university, so I knew my next step, and I think that helped when I was like explaining to my family why I was changing. And it was probably I was really, really unhappy while I was studying fashion, and I think, you know, my family did actually see that as well. So
Yeah, definitely. I think it's probably a thing that having the right kind of people around you when you have that realization, if they can see that actually what's going to make you happy is something else.
yeah, definitely.
You rely on, particularly family, to support you. So that's a great story. So to come then back onto your path and your story, talk to us a little bit more about how you ended up in Miami, because going from Queens Mary then over to Miami is a big change. So how did that come about?
So yeah, it was a study abroad program. I guess I applied. I was one. Not many people actually do end up applying. I think like it's everything. You know, it's kind of like the butterfly effect or just the path. Like, not many people ended up applying for a study abroad because for lots of people, they just moved to London. It was all a big change. And then you had to apply like a month after we started in our first year. So the fact that I'd already had a year in London at a different university, already felt settled, and then kind of gave me the motivation to then like go through this application process. I feel quite lucky about that. California was actually my first choice. I got told initially that I didn't get in. And I think this is a moment I think about often, because I basically got told that I didn't get into the study abroad program. I remember it was in the morning, I'd got the email, and then I went to a lecture, and it was with, you know, everyone on my course. And there was one other guy on my course that had applied, and he had got in. But we were like really good. We were good mates. And I knew that we had like equal grades at least. So I was like sat in this lecture. I must remember thinking like, what? Like, why him and not me? And so at the end of the lecture, I was like, right. I remember I was like, I'm going to be late to the next one. I went to the office and I spoke to them, and they were just like, oh yeah, there's a problem on the system and we don't have your grades. And I was like, so you just weren't going to tell me, and you just were like, I just wasn't going to go. So they're like, yeah, where do you want to go? And I said, oh, California. Like, oh no, sorry, that's filled up straight away. Next option, I was like, okay, Miami. And they were like, yeah, okay, off you go. And that was just like a real moment for me, because if I hadn't have gone and asked them, I wouldn't have gone. I probably wouldn't be a marine scientist, because I don't see how I would ever have pictured myself as being one.
It turned out to be a good thing, right? Still, Miami was a great place to be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was a real kind of turning point in my life and just set me on this path. It kind of also happened again to me in Miami. So I was only meant to go for one semester. I loved living there, and I loved being at the university, and I was so enjoying doing all the marine science. But I basically just wrote this email to Queen Mary saying, I really, really don't want to come back. What can I do to stay? They said, if you can do your dissertation there, fine, you can stay. So I managed to find someone at the University of Miami. He was actually a British professor, which I think maybe helped me a bit, because maybe he like understood the kind of the like, you know, final year dissertation system. And he was like, yeah, you can do your dissertation with me. And that meant that I could stay in Miami for the whole year, which again was a real kind of moment, because that extra 4 months or whatever, I got to do loads more of the marine science stuff, you know, meet loads more people in the world and things like that, in the marine science world.
Unbelievable. And I think also people will be interested to hear about the other opportunities you've got, because to live the lifestyle in Miami is amazing in itself, but you also managed to live and work and research in places like Madagascar. So if you could just tell us a little bit what it was like in terms of living in Madagascar, what exactly you were doing there, and how it compares to living somewhere like Miami now.
Okay, yeah. So I was in Madagascar because that's where my PhD was based. So my PhD is based working with small-scale fishing communities in southwest Madagascar. I work with people called, they are a traditional community called Vezo people. It is incredibly inspiring and amazing working with Vezo people, because their life, their food security and their culture is based on their relationship with the ocean, and it has been for the last 2,000 years. So yeah, in my PhD, my time being in Madagascar was cut down a bit because of COVID. It meant for 2 years I couldn't visit for one reason or another. Either their borders were closed or they were on the UK red list. But so I spent, a total of about 8 months there over the course of the 4 years of my PhD. Yeah, I mean, Madagascar is one of the poorest countries in the world. People there are living like under the poverty line. I lived in an incredible place, but it was very different from Miami. It was, very basic. I was lucky in the village that I did have running water that came from a water tank, but most people in the village don't have running water. Most people in the village don't have bathrooms. People are really, 85% of people there are fishers, and people are really kind of thinking about what they're going to eat the next day, and fishing to sell to the buyers which come through the village each day. So yeah, it was a very different experience living in Miami or London or Costa Rica, where I am now.
Interestingly as well, why did you end up doing the PhD? Even people who have done degrees at science, is it particularly difficult for them to then go into a job like what you're doing now? I think it's important, obviously, for anyone listening that might want to go down this route to know, do they have to do a PhD to get to where you are now?
So I did a master's at University of Edinburgh in marine. It's called Marine Systems and Policies. So it was a mix of marine science and also policy around marine conservation in the UK and globally. And then I actually did go into industry. I got a job as a marine biologist for an environmental consultancy in the UK. But just before that, actually, I'd got some funding between my master's and that industry job. I'd got some funding to do my own research. So that was kind of a taste. And it was this research on these very remote islands off the west coast of Mexico. So it was kind of super exciting. I'm quite an adventurous person. So the fact I kind of got to go on a boat, it was a 12-day boat trip. You go there, there's no signal, you don't go on land for 12 days. It was very exciting diving. So I kind of got a taste for independent research and leading my own research projects. And I was applying to PhDs actually at that time, but I didn't get anywhere. And so I got this job in industry and kind of quite quickly realized that it wasn't for me. I really enjoy the creativity of academia. So being able to create your own research, being able to kind of work on different methods and things. And you just don't get that working as a marine biologist consultant. And so all through working, I didn't work there for long. I worked there for 9 months, but all through that time, I was kind of working on this PhD project. And in my master's, I'd met some amazing academics who ended up being my supervisors for my PhD, and they were really kind of incredibly supportive throughout this process. I owe a lot to them, and they helped me basically get this opportunity. So I worked at the consultancy for about 9 months, and then I ended up doing a PhD. But a PhD is one route into this world, but again, working as a consultant for an environmental consultancy, that is a lot of using kind of the similar skills that I've used in my research, but it's just less creative because you're doing what people what is assigned to you. But for example, at the moment I'm in Costa Rica staying with a friend. Her and her husband have a shark conservation charity. It does incredible work. They responsible for some amazing policy changes around sharks in Costa Rica, shark conservation. And neither of them have PhDs. So,
Incredible.
Interesting. And if you don't mind me asking, how does the whole financing part work? How you say you went to Costa Rica, Like how is that covered? And then also the financing of people who might be listening to this and saying, all right, I'd love to do a PhD and a master's. Like, is it a very expensive process? How have you found that whole finance journey?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that question because I think it's important. So yeah, masters, I got a student loan. You can get a master's loan the same as for your undergrad if you're in the UK, that is. And then for a PhD, I would say a majority of PhDs now are paid. So you can do self-funded PhDs, but I only knew one person in my kind of amongst all my colleagues while I was doing my PhD who was they weren't self-funded, they were also marine scientists working on stuff to do with whales, so they were securing their own funding through different supporters, but my PhD was supported through NERC, so that's the National Environmental Research Council, so that's a government department or a government agency. So yeah, so I was funding through the government. My funding for my PhD ended, and also through your PhD, I was working on the side, so other jobs for University of Edinburgh, other kind of random consultancy jobs here and there, and now I have a couple of jobs again through the University of Edinburgh, and also I'm a consultant, so I'm working work as a consultant for organisations.
So to go on to then a bit more of like what you're doing in terms of we usually ask day-to-day thing, but like looking at your Instagram alone, I know that no day is ever going to be the same for you. You always seem to be in like a different part of the world, diving into different oceans. So I think for like to listen to you and to hear about your experiences, it would be great to know like what are the best bits, and when you are diving in all of these incredible places around the world with these amazing animals, what are you there exactly to do?
What are the best bits? Yeah, for me, it is being able to visit different places, but not only visit different places, but like really live and experience different places. So I really like to go and visit. I have to do it for conferences and things, but the type of travel where you could just go to a country for a few days and you have to be, here, there and everywhere, and then you leave. That's like not the kind of travel that I enjoy doing, but I really enjoy like going and getting to know the people and getting to know the place. It's funny because I do a lot of diving, but actually in recent years, my research doesn't necessarily need me to dive, but I guess I'm always in coastal areas, so I make the most of going diving while I'm there. I've definitely done some challenging dives in terms of currents and in terms of conditions. Been diving with bull sharks when you can like not see in front of your face. That's how bad the visibility was. But I don't want to give sharks a bad rep, because diving with sharks the majority of the time is perfectly fine and safe. I think, the most time I've spent is in Madagascar, and some of my favourite times when I reflect on Madagascar and things that I'm incredibly grateful to have experienced are going out fishing with the fishers there. So where I work, they don't use any motorized boats still. They still use traditional wooden dugout canoes. So the canoes are made out of one tree trunk that have been dug out. And then they use these kind of sheets as sails. And the Vezo people, they still, when they fish using nets, they free dive a lot. So they just are incredible at free diving. And I would go out sometimes just to kind of understand better how they were fishing. Also sometimes to try and do some filming, because filming is another part of what I do. Some filmmaking. And just seeing like how these guys free dive. I was out there with like a 6-year-old, and I swear for 2 hours he was under the water way more than he was above the water. And like I was trying to keep up with him and I could not, and he was just laughing at me. So those kind of experiences I feel incredibly grateful for.
Then what about on the opposite side of things? I think it's always important where even like on the surface looking at whatever you're doing and whatever you're up to in the world might look incredible, but is there anything that people should be aware of that maybe is the downside?
I would say the one thing, definitely Instagram is a highlight reel. So I would say 85% of my time is in front of a computer, and 15% of my time is, you know, out in the field. I mean, that might vary. For example, you know, I was in Madagascar for 3 months at a time, so I guess that kind of throws that ratio out. But still in Madagascar, I'm working on the computer a lot, and then I'm going out and doing field work. So yeah, I think that's something that people maybe don't realize, and definitely, like, the more, hopefully this doesn't happen too much, but the more as you work your way up, it's the less field work you do. It's like, I feel like it's like that with all jobs. Like, the further you get up, like, the less of the fun stuff you end up doing. So yeah, but that's another reason I do enjoy and like academia, because you can still keep your foot in the door, that sort of thing. And yeah, the constant traveling can be a struggle. I say constant traveling. I do have periods where I'm in the UK for a long time, but definitely, like, having that base. At the moment, I'm trying to figure out where I do want to be based in the UK. And so, yeah, I guess it's a very different lifestyle to some of my friends who, you know, I'm now at the age where, well, my friends have houses and are getting married. And yeah, I'm definitely kind of quite far from just settling down in one certain place. And I guess, although people do it, this job kind of makes that more difficult.
Do you ever feel jealous of that stability, that lifestyle, the house, the family, the kids, or would you not change it?
Do I ever feel jealous? I don't feel jealous. I feel sometimes like, I should be doing that, you know, I should be, I should have more stability. And I do, the last 6 months I have kind of, I've been doing a lot of moving, actually for like 8 months now. And I do crave some of, like, having a stable base. But it will come. Yeah, I just know it will come.
What keeps you from, like, you know, when you have those thoughts, being like, okay, I should go back?
Yeah, being grateful that I've managed to, I think, something I think about sometimes is, like, what would 16-year-old Amber think of Amber now? And I think she'd be like, that's pretty cool. And so I try to think about that. You know, I am doing things that I really was dreaming about when I was younger. So yeah, trying to keep that. But also, like, I guess you just don't think about these things when you're younger. And it's something I'm thinking about more now.
Just the other question that I'm fascinated in is you've spent so much time in these, like, slightly less developed communities, and I'm sure marine biology, as you mentioned to me in a voice note, is so important. What more can be done in the area? What are the big issues that people listening might not, like, people listening from the UK right now have no idea that's going on in the areas you've been amazingly lucky to see?
I mean, so much. I think something maybe that people don't appreciate is the impact of industrial fishing on small scale fishes. So, for example, in Madagascar, big industrial fishing boats from other countries come and fish the waters around Madagascar. And these are doing that with, like, permits and licenses granted by the Malagasy government. But sometimes they're in direct competition with the small scale fishers who, as I mentioned, are, you know, reliant on fish for their livelihoods and for their food security. And they're, sometimes in direct competition. So it's really just, it's just not fair, because they're just not catching as much fish as they should be. And they don't have many other options, because where I work is incredibly arid. You know, agriculture isn't viable. The infrastructure in Madagascar is incredibly, it's got some of the worst road infrastructure in the world. So, like, there's a tiny bit of tourism, but, like, wide scale tourism in that region is, like, really far off and not really viable at the moment. So yeah, and that's happening in Madagascar, but it's also happening in the UK. So a project I'm working on at the moment is actually on UK fisheries, and yeah, basically the conflict between industrial fishers, and that's often a few very powerful people and companies earning a lot of profit, versus the small scale fishers. So that's, you know, nearly three quarters, or yeah, around three quarters of the UK fishing boats count as small scale. And they're the people that are kind of really struggling with these huge industrial boats being allowed to fish way beyond basically what's being scientifically recommended.
Wow. I imagine what you're doing is incredibly like eye-opening. What you're going to be doing in the next few years is going to be massively important to the whole ecosystems that you're working in. And what we'd like to ask towards the end is what is that longer term plan in the next 5-10 years? Are you going to continue to travel and to research in the way that you're doing now, or will it take a slightly different path?
I think, yeah, I want to continue on doing what I'm doing now. I'm definitely just coming out of the PhD. The PhD is this kind of nice, supportive cradle where you have that guaranteed income. You have a lot of freedom to kind of, a PhD is an incredible time to like, yeah, use that creativity that I talked about. So yeah, the next likely position that I would get in academia is called a postdoc. So that's the kind of next level up, you might say, from a PhD. But also, yeah, figuring out this consultancy. I'm really enjoying it at the moment. I'm really enjoying like the variety of different projects. Like I say, I'm working on one on overfishing in the UK. I'm working on another which is based in Madagascar. And yeah, so kind of at the moment, I'm trying to figure out. I see moving forward, I see probably my life as a kind of a mosaic of different activities, and trying to kind of figure out the right arrangement of that at the moment. Do I see myself traveling a lot? Yeah, I really hope so. I think definitely for the next couple of years, I'm going to try and spend some time outside the UK.
Also nicely brings me on to the final question, which we like to ask all our guests. If you could go back to the start, say when you're in fashion school or whenever you feel like it, tell us one thing that you do the same, one thing you do differently, and one thing you tell yourself to motivate yourself.
Okay. So I think the one thing I would do the same, and we've touched on it before, is just that not being afraid to ask, especially if you really want something. So the key times in my life where I feel like I've really potentially felt nervous about asking, but have done it, is the time when I managed to go abroad to Miami. That was a real inflection point. The time when I asked if I could then stay for the whole year in Miami, that was a real inflection point. And then I kind of touched on it, but after I finished my master's, I managed to secure some funding to go and do some independent research. And at the time, it felt like quite a bold question. I'd just done a master's, I was quite inexperienced, it was quite a challenging place to work. But I kind of went for it and asked this organisation if they'd support me, and they said yes. So it could have been easy for me to just accept the route and the path that was presented to me, but I really wanted something, and I kind of went that step further and asked for it, and it's worked out. Okay, the one thing I do differently, and I think I'm still working on it, maybe I think many of us are, but is like imposter syndrome in what I do, and in self-confidence. That's something that I'm working on. I'm not sure in terms of imposter syndrome. I just think like constantly reminding myself that everyone's out here trying their best, and even though sometimes I might not feel like an expert, I am actually an expert in many things in marine science now, because I've just spent 4 years like studying it intensely, and just knowing that I have a right to kind of be there as much as anybody else. Okay, I think there's a couple of things I think about. First of all, I don't like the word, I don't like using this word as much, but like sometimes people say to me, oh, you're incredibly lucky. And I think, it's not that I'm incredibly lucky, but I've really, put in the time and the passion and the effort to like increase my likelihood of being lucky. So like, what is it? Increasing the surface area of your luck. enabling luck to happen to you. And that doesn't come from being idle. That comes from like a lot of work and passion. So yeah, that. And again, something else I touched on earlier, just sometimes like taking a moment to reflect where you are now. And yeah, I have kind of along the way, I don't do it a lot, but like I write stuff down about where I want to be, or where I see myself in the future, and like just taking a moment to like stop and think about like, oh, I have actually achieved that. Like I am doing that. Because I think it's so easy, especially in our culture, just to keep wanting more and more and more, and keep kind of just, you know, you achieve one thing and then you're gonna, what's the next, but just kind of taking stock and appreciating like what you've achieved and how far you've come.
What a beautiful way to finish. Yeah, I think you've summed everything up so nicely there. For you kind of epitomised everything we're looking for in somebody who's just done something which is really important, but you absolutely love what you're doing, and the stories and lifestyle you get to live alongside it are just incredible. So thank you so much for sharing all that with us. I'm very jealous of what you're doing, and yeah, like quite inspired by it, to be honest. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was like really great to chat.
Okay, that was interesting. Love listening to that from start to finish. Let's get into some takeaways. So over to you, Jamie.
Yeah, definitely. I thought a lot of what she said was really interesting. But one of the key quotes I think she came up with, which is a great idea when you're talking about a path less chosen, is to follow that gut instinct. And she linked it in with actually talking about a degree, which is a nice message as well. She said the degree isn't the be all and end all. Even when she was in that fashion, she had that gut feeling. And she was like, ultimately, what I achieve in fashion is not going to be relevant to how happy I am in my career going forward. So she followed what her gut told her, and now she's ended up doing a career which is incredible. So I think that was the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, for sure. Interested to see how I'm going to explain this, but throughout everything she spoke about, she had a level of calmness and assurance in herself that things will work out. And even though she had to do things proactively, like ask questions at the certain points that they needed to, and push for things, she didn't at any point sound like she really like strayed off or got confused. She was really like sure what she wanted, worked out what she wanted, and then was sure what she wanted. And I think it was really reassuring to know, because I think there's a lot of people who go and are like not really sure what they're going to do, and then get very stressed out about it. But in fact, she spoke about following a very like a step-by-step process and knowing that things will work out, and that calmness and assurance in yourself, I think, is pretty important if you're going into a place that no one really has done before, or at least is not a popular route.
If you don't mind, I'll throw out a third one, which I think is something that's important to consider, just so we don't always gloss over everything they're doing, is that she totally accepted that her Instagram is her highlights reel, and anyone that goes to visit it on the back of this podcast will look at it and be like, wow, what an incredible life. She said it's not actually always amazing. 85% is still behind the computer, but what she's kind of telling herself, and I think we can also flip it on its head for people that aren't doing something like what she's doing at the moment, is just to be grateful and remember what your younger self would have thought about what you're doing. So anyone that is maybe working 9 to 5 in an office right now might think, what would my younger self think about what I'm doing now? And they'd probably think, oh, that's boring. That might be the kick up the backside to go and do something different. But for her, it's that younger person who's now looking up to what she's doing and thinks, God, what you're doing is incredible. So even when it's not amazing all the time, and Instagram will only present the good bits, she can still like make peace with the fact that what she's doing is better than anything she could have wished for when she was a younger self, and is very cool.
Do you want to summarize those three?
Yep, sounds good. Okay, so the first point we went for was to follow your gut instinct. The second point we went for was just to be self-aware and knowing exactly what you're doing, have that self-assurance. And the third one is just being grateful and thinking how your younger self would look at what you're doing now and think that's a very cool thing to do.
Amazing. Sounds good. Okay, let's wrap it up there. Great episode. Looking forward to having more cool guests on like Amber.
I'm looking forward to the next episode. But in the meantime, check out all of Amber's stuff and follow us on all the relevant social medias, and we will see you next time.